At Kenyatta International Convention Center, where there was an interministerial public hearing here at KICC, where 6 cabinet secretaries were present, and they were basically taking a look at some of the key issues regarding the Jubilee administration. Of course, we did see the minister in charge of Treasury, I beg your pardon, the cabinet secretary in charge of Treasury, Henry Rotich. He did make his presentations this morning, and he did talk at length about what measures the National Treasury has been able to achieve during his tenure in office. We also did see the Energy and Petroleum Cabinet Secretary Charles Keter also making a strong presentation around what Kenya is doing on the energy front. And also we did see the other CS was actually for infrastructure and transport, not Michael, but James Macharia, who did also present some of the key outcomes that the Jubilee administration has been able to address. And I just want us to get into an interesting conversation now with Johnson Andheri, who is the manager for corporate finance at ABC Capital, joining us this afternoon to help us take an assessment of how the Jubilee administration has performed in office for the last 3 years. Many thanks, Johnson, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Johnson, it has been an eventful day. We did see a number of issues coming up. Of course, there was a lot of attention really in social media platforms under the hashtag GOK symposium. We did see a lot of Kenyans expressing their joy and others expressing their frustration around how the Jubilee administration has performed. First things first, let's take a quick rundown of the Jubilee Manifesto. One of the promises that the President Kenyatta-led government did promise Kenyans when he assumed office was he will see to it that Kenyans get free maternal care. This sort of saw the light of day. It was implemented, and currently it is actually one of the commendable projects that the Jubilee administration has managed to do. What are your views?
First of all, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the government for organizing this forum, where they can be able to communicate what they're doing. And it's very important, I think, simply because this is what the national discourse ought to be, as opposed to who got elected where, or I think we ought to be discussing issues, and I'm happy that they carried it through to Twitter, which allowed the general Kenyan to participate. Now, having said that, yes, this government on the spending side, I think, has been prolific.
Before we go into spending, let's discuss the maternal care.
Yeah, well, I was going to get to that.
It's fine.
So I was saying it has been prolific. And that's simply because, of course, that's not its money. It's other people's money. It's easy to spend other people's money. So if you're going to spend other people's money, maternal health care, education sound like noble endeavors to pursue. Although I would have preferred that we have a more vibrant private sector driven initiative, because over time we have seen that is what is more sustainable. If you go back historically, we had free healthcare, if I'm not wrong, and schooling, and over time, as the government, after the Cold War, and as the government started running, lacking resources, we saw cost sharing coming through, and the readjustment was very painful, and that's why I keep saying, if we focus, for me, the best form of welfare to society is jobs, as opposed to free programs.
So this was one of the main achievements, if I would say, for the Jubilee administration, for the last 3 years they have been in government. Of course, a lot of public applause, especially from the women who do believe that this was a noble cause of sorts. And if you look at the bigger picture also, we've seen maternal deaths almost reducing by a half thanks to different campaigns that have been spearheaded by the Jubilee administration. But let's move on now to one of the other promises, Andheri. The Jubilee administration promised that they will have connected they would actually have increased electricity production in the country by 5,000 megawatts by 2017. As we speak at the moment, the currently installed power capacity is standing at about 2,300 megawatts, and we are just a year before we hit 2017. We still have about 2,700 megawatts to go. I did speak to the PS for energy. He sounded quite upbeat, saying that we will achieve it, but by all indications experts are saying, hey, wait a minute, we might not be able to hack this, because if you look at the capital aspect involved in energy projects, if you look at the issues around the way leaves, if you look at the issues to do with the tendering, I mean, these are long-term projects, and yet the Jubilee administration promised Kenyans that they will have this power on the national grid, and Kenya will be energy sufficient, and we will be able to even sell energy to some of the neighboring countries.
Well, yeah, right. I think for me, the important thing is to not so much hit the 5,000 megawatts, especially. We might need clarification. Mm-hmm. You know, when you say energy production is very different from installed capacity.
Yeah.
Because energy production is usually a smaller proportion of installed capacity, especially where you have renewables like solar and wind and even hydro, which you can see the fluctuations over time.
Yeah.
Having said that, like I said earlier, for me it was the issue is shall supply meet demand, and I think the commercial approach to it, because the agents that are being used to deliver this are, I mean, if you think about Akira from Centum,
yeah,
and Amu from Centum, Akira, Amu is supposed to do 1,000 megawatts. Akira is, I think, 200 or so megawatts. So that's huge. That's huge, and that's a huge contribution from the private sector. And the approach of commercial or private sector approach is important in the sense that it delivers supply when demand is required. You see, it delivers energy when it's demanded,
and at a competitive price as well.
Yeah, because there's a cost to having power available that no one needs.
Yeah.
So it has to be matched, and I think private sector does a better job of matching than the government does. And to go and like you point out, I mean the capital required. I mean it was obviously ambitious. 5,000 megawatts will probably require $5,000 or more. $5,000 million. That's about $5 billion. That's huge. You know, that's a good proportion of our GDP just on power.
Yeah.
And to supply who? So there needs to be some sort of syncing with economic growth, because it's the power requirements from manufacturers, processors, movement of goods and services that requires this energy, and as a result, if you go ahead of it, you'll find you'll have to raise taxes that will make these nascent industries impossible to set up in the first place.
That's true.
So the solution becomes the problem that it was supposed to resolve.
Interesting. Of course, the other thing is around reducing the cost of energy, and making Kenya competitive, as well as trying to see to it that the local mwananchi is able to buy goods at a cheaper price. People are able to grow their businesses, their SMEs. I mean, how did we do on that front?
Not too well, in my opinion. Not too well. Two things. First of all, there's international environment, where you had the burst of the commodities bubble. So oil that was trading at $80 a barrel is now available trading at $30 a barrel. So with that kind of windfall, that should have translated somewhat, but not too much did. And I think the main culprit there is monetary policy. Now, the government, the central bank wants to target money supply price change growth rate of about 5%. But I think, in my opinion, that's too high. That's too high. And in fact, we do consistently above 5%. Okay. And they have been given a variance of about 40% of that 5, so it's plus or minus 2% of that 5%, which again I think is too much. I think it should have been a ceiling of 5%, so that inflation should have been consistently below 5%. And the reason is that is the rate at which purchasing power is decaying at. Okay. And 5% over 5 years is significant. And if you look at what that means in terms of replacing capital goods, so that a machine you bought at $100,000 today will not be available at $100,000 in future, 5 years hence. So you've got to factor that in, and you know what that means? It raises the cost of doing business. So we've got to look at it from that perspective. I know the government looks at it from the perspective of financing its projects. That's why. Well,
Andheri, we want to listen into some of the various CSs who did make their presentations today. We did have Henry Rotich, Charles Keter, Mining CS, Dan Kazungu,